We were seeing these businesses where the product kind of was its own acquisition engine. The product did a lot of the selling, where folks were already set up and seeing value before they'd ever talked to a sales rep. Product as acquisition is a super interesting space. You look at HubSpot, they're now known as a PLG business, but before they had any kind of concept of PLG, they had their website creator.
Social proof has always played a huge element in how people purchase. Imagine getting your customers to do your demos for you.
Think about what can we do that would be normally manual work that we can offload to a product experience, or nowadays kind of an AI or automated experience that allows us to do this at scale, do it faster, do it cheaper, have a better customer experience, optimize it with data. So you can start to actually not just kind of be aware of your customers and where they are, but actually start to automate or orchestrate getting your customers to see more value.
Behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened. How much time are your sales reps wasting on manual tasks at the end of every sales call? How confident are you that your team has full visibility into the pipeline? Are you sure no deals are slipping through the cracks? Staying on top of every opportunity is tough, and that's why we're thrilled to partner with Attention. Attention's AI-powered call recording platform ensures that your deals are executed flawlessly. Records your calls, generates next step summaries, action items, and even creates scorecards for every single call, so your reps can continuously improve. But that's really just the beginning. Attention's generalized insights allow you to ask any question across all of your conversations. Think of it like ChatGPT for your sales calls. And the magic doesn't stop there. Attention also lets you build automated workflows tailored to your needs. For example, if a customer mentions they're at risk of churning during a call, Attention can automatically loop in a sales director or a solutions engineer to ensure that customer receives the full white glove treatment, reducing churn, keeping your business thriving. Attention is helping companies onboard reps faster, increase the productivity of their existing teams, and giving revenue leaders unparalleled visibility into their pipelines, all while automating those tedious, dreaded manual tasks. If any of those challenges sound familiar, I highly recommend checking them out at attention.tech.
Hello and welcome back, everyone, to the GTM podcast. Excited to be hanging out with you for the next 45 minutes or so. Appreciate you spending time with us. I know there's a million different areas and places where you can spend your podcast time, and we appreciate you hanging with us. Super excited for this next guest. I'm joined by Kyle Poyar. Kyle, welcome, man.
Thanks for having me on, Scott.
Man, been excited for this one for a while. We've got to collaborate on some content through our newsletters and have been a fan from afar for a long time. And it's cool to be able to spend some time together in this format.
Yeah, likewise. I feel like we're writing and thinking about a lot of the same things. So this will be fun. We'll have to find areas to disagree.
Totally. That'll be for our listeners. If we disagree on a few things, that's what we'll judge as success. We can't be agreeing the whole time. And so quickly for our listeners. So Kyle is co-founder and operating partner at Tremont. Super quick background, spent 6 years in kind of big consulting, then moved it over into VC land, where he had truly just an incredible 8-year run at OpenView, starting as the director of marketing strategy, moving up to VP of growth, and then, ending up as an operating partner. And, sort of along that way, and I'd love to understand how it kind of went down, but you've kind of become the voice of the PLG movement through your writing. And I'd highly recommend any of our listeners subscribing to Growth Unhinged. Incredible newsletter, one of the ones I read, very frequently. When did that start happening? Was that just a function of, OpenView investing in a lot of PLG companies? You got super interested in it and just kind of started geeking out over this? Or how did you I feel like A, spot this trend before it was widely talked about, and B, start building such a big following around it?
Yeah, it's a fun backstory. I can't take credit for spotting the trend. I joined OpenView 2016, and my partner Blake Bartlett had been investing in kind of businesses that he was starting to call product-led businesses, and his mindset was, "Hey, we actually used to think about folks that didn't have an outbound motion. That was an investment risk because they didn't have a predictable, go-to-market, machine at that point. But we were seeing these businesses like, the Datadogs and Calendlys of the world, where the product kind of was its own acquisition engine. The product did a lot of the selling, where folks were already set up and seeing value before they'd ever talked to a sales rep. Sometimes folks were buying on a self-service, basis, and then a lot of the expansion just happened organically as people use the product. So we're like, there's something here because many of these companies, instead of growing slower as they scale and things getting harder because you're trying to just hire and ramp and retain more and more reps, like things actually grow a little bit faster because you have more data, you can optimize the motion. And, in a perfect world, you're able to be super profitable. So some of the businesses that have the highest ARR per employee are product led businesses. I don't know if you saw the OnlyFans news recently, but record breaking ARR per employee.
What
A
was it
little bit of a
again? It
different
was
view on PLG, but
insane. It was like 30 million per
yeah,
employee.
you cannot get there unless you have some sort of PLG motion. I just don't think it is possible.
Yeah.
And so we were noticing these were kind of outliers in the best possible sense. And, around that time that Atlassian was gearing up to go public. And so there seemed to be a critical mass of these companies that were forming. And it was what was interesting to us is that they had some similar characteristics, but they all described their business in different ways. It was like bottom up, B2C to B, viral products, like consumerization of IT. Like they all had their own flavors of it. And then you talk to the founders, and they're kind of making up these principles from scratch or adopting things they saw in the consumer world. We said, hey, there's some frameworks here, right? So it was a big part of my job over an 8-year run to try to start, figuring out what these companies were doing, interviewing founders and leaders there, putting together frameworks to share, probably collecting data on it so people knew what good benchmarks on like free to paid conversion looked like. And I remember I organized the first PLG summit back in 2017. We actually got some of like the most incredible speakers you can imagine, but that was for like 100 people. That was our way of celebrating that we could get these influential people to be at least aware of the term, using it, you know, giving talks where they talk about how they do this in their business. And then it slowly started to build where it wasn't until called 2019 we had an event where we got about 600 attendees, and that's when it really was starting to break through. The chief customer officer at Figma gave a great keynote there. And then going into the pandemic, people started to go, oh wow, like I can actually um, I can see this because now that I'm at home on my computer, I'm actually looking out for the next generation of tools that I can make myself more productive or improve the experience. I'm going out finding tools, bringing them to my job, and telling my boss what to use. And a lot of the PLG tools grew like wildfire in the pandemic. So that's when it really took off and became a household term. But also, at the same time, folks had maybe surface level knowledge of it, adopted it when they maybe shouldn't have, got disillusioned by it. So we kind of went through the whole hype cycle just in a pretty condensed period of time.
Hmm. It's been cool to watch, and obviously the trend continues to grow and grow. Question for you: do you think we're moving towards a future where the vast majority of software companies will have some sort of PLG motion?
I think it's becoming inevitable, especially if you think about AI, the kind of combination of AI and software. Now, I was never a purist about PLG. I think that if I look back at some of the things I did, I probably conveyed more, more of that, demeanor than I actually thought. But to me, PLG was always more of a dimmer switch than an on or off switch. And there's elements of this where you can think about techniques where, hey, what can we do that would be normally manual work that we can offload to a product experience, or, nowadays also a kind of an AI or automated experience that allows us to do this at scale, do it faster, do it cheaper, have a better customer experience, optimize it with data. And so if you think about from getting folks to know who you are in the first place, getting them to experience value in your product, getting them to buy, getting them to advocate for a bigger purchase, getting them to renew, it is pretty hard to imagine a business that can't apply at least one, like a kind of fundamental PLG pillar along that journey, especially if you think about a world where we're increasingly having kind of usage based or success based pricing for AI products. Uh, Pretty hard to imagine you not wanting to adopt some PLG practices to drive more adoption, right? If that's the only way you're getting paid is it when people use the product. It's also hard to imagine, not wanting to take advantage of some of these principles around demonstrating value with things like an interactive demo on your site so people can actually see your product before they go talk to an SDR to get qualified. And that way you're able to convert more of that traffic that's on your website and speed up the sales process. Like that's a great example of PLG that just about anyone can adopt. And so I think about like if you're not open to this toolkit as something that can really help your business, you're probably missing out. And you're probably doing things like lengthening your sales cycle for no reason, potentially even setting up too much services kind of intensiveness around post purchase. And you're going to set up for a business that's probably expensive to manage and scale, and probably doesn't serve all the addressable customers that you could serve.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the areas we're gonna agree on. So one for the agree section as so far, but I would say initially I did disagree, and I felt like there was some complex products and software out there. It was like there's too much education that needs to happen, like letting them in without the proper resources, education, enablement is just crazy. But I think that was because my view on what PLG could be was just incorrect, and I think there's a lot of ways that you can. Like I'll give an example at Outreach, there was a point where I was like, we need to have some sort of like PLG motion. Let's do it. And everyone was sort of against it because we saw like our best customers, we handheld them, we helped create all their sequences, and then they were off to the races, and there was a lot of like change management involved and things. Um, and but then I think this was Max's idea. It was like, well, why don't we just like build like some sort of free tool that gets them thinking about outreach, like a basic sequence builder. And this was like 2018, like a lot before like Gen AI hype, and everyone's got something that can write an email sequence for you now. And like that got them thinking about the problem and the solution and the way that Outreach wanted sellers to act at that time. And that was like, that's essentially a PLG motion. It's just like not directly into your product. Like, do you look at almost like interactive content offerings as part of a PLG motion?
Oh, totally. And yeah, I mean, those are often called sidecar products or lead magnets, but I think product as acquisition is a super interesting space. I mean, you look at HubSpot, they're now known as a PLG business, but before they had any kind of concept of PLG, they had their website grader where you would put in your URL. They give you a bunch of scores around, your SEO friendliness, security, and essentially provide a bunch of recommendations for how to grow your business. That was all automated just by kind of scanning your site. And by the way, HubSpot had tools that would help improve on like all of the different scores, and I think they've created like millions and millions of websites at this point. It's something that essentially adds immediate value for someone that's thinking about, growing their online presence. It helps make a business case for adopting HubSpot. It gives a lot of trust in HubSpot as a brand. And if you believe in that kind of content, then it's like inevitable that you're going to want to talk to them about a purchase. That's actually how so when I was in consulting, I made a business case for HubSpot in like 2014 uh, because we weren't using these kinds of tools. And I stumbled upon the website grader, and that's one of the ways that I started making that case internally. And so if I think of that as a perfect example, and it's so much different than the SEO bait content approach where you go, what are the most important keywords, and then how do we write content for a search engine as opposed to for a person, so that we optimize to kind of be as visible as possible whenever they're thinking about someone that's writing a relevant topic. But you're adding very little or no value to your end user, uh, and there's nothing that's sort of personalized to what they're trying to do. And I think this approach of a lightweight product experience where you can have that super fast time to value and solve someone's problem is a fascinating space. And I mean, some like other examples that I would point to, copy AI in the go to market tech space has done an amazing job with like dozens of lead magnets on their site, kind of similar to this outreach approach of like sample cold email generator. They even have like a sample Instagram caption generator. And these are super lightweight free tools. And I believe they use AI to create the tools, but they also use AI to create examples of the tools, and then be able to write the landing page to go market the tool. So it's an amazing way to actually build dozens of these super lightweight product experiences that bring people in and kind of help show the core value what they can do.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. Uh, Do you think it works as effective? So, as a fund, we're spending a lot of time in kind of the cross section between, vertical SaaS and AI. So, think unsexy industries, like AI for customs brokers and things like that. Do you think a PLG offering is going to be as well adopted in like outside of software selling to software? Because I do feel like, at least intellectually, like, well, so people in software, they're more technically adept, they're more comfortable going in, interacting with something. For maybe some of these other verticals, do you think we're just going to be a few years behind and it's still coming? Or do you think maybe that is an area where it might be less effective?
Look, I mean, it's one of those things where I hate to be categorical on it because all of a sudden someone comes up with a creative idea and is able to apply some of these principles in a way that you would have never thought would work, and then just is incredibly effective. So, like, look, I've seen it work really well in vertical industries that are less sexy. You look at, an industry like the roofing industry, roofing professionals. There's a business called Roofer that has a PLG motion for this.
I met that
Uh,
founder the other week, actually, funnily enough, at the Alpha Summit by Crosslink. Great guy.
Yeah, he's awesome. But if you think about like for the roofer, they're quoting a job, and one of the things they need is a satellite image of the house to figure out the measurements and the pitch and all that of the roof. I don't know the terms, but they basically need to be able to get that information to be able to pull together a quote. And so if you're, wanting if you're needing that as part of the process, you're going to go out and seek that out. And Roofer's going to have tools that allow you to generate one of these really, really fast and an affordable way. And then, oh, by the way, you actually want to apply your custom quoting rules to basically take these measurements and turn it into a quote. Oh, do you actually want your proposal to look professional? Do you want to be able to email that to someone? Do you want to do e-signature once they accept it? Do you want to be able to email market to these people if they don't sign so you close more business? Do you want CRM? Like, it's pretty inevitable that someone's going to actually adopt that first product and then going to want to go on this journey of buying more. And so I think that's a fascinating example of, it's maybe hard to think about like a classic freemium business model for a roofing industry when people are not going proactively searching for like roofing CRM, but they found this really interesting methodology that's tied to the life cycle that these businesses go through, and offers value really quickly. And so I've seen that. I've also seen PLG illegal dating back to 2016, 2017 era. And, OpenView had invested in a business called Logical, and they did e-discovery for legal teams. And what they realized is that legal is actually a super collaborative industry. Now, sometimes competitive more than collaborative, but there's sort of two sides or more in every space. You might have a law firm and then the corporate team that hired the law firm, right? And then service providers that surround everything. And so what they had realized was if you can make the process of essentially taking the tool and being able to share access with other people in lightweight ways, you can start to drive this viral loop around something that you would have never thought would have had a PLG opportunity.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's really just about how creative you can get and mapping out, the all the problems your buyer goes through and in along their journey. I mean, like, is there a lightweight version where we can insert ourselves and give them something for free? I love it. Okay, so you mentioned kind of organically a few things there we talked about. So interactive demos, one, thinking that's becoming table stakes pretty quickly. Custom interactive demos. Second thing we talked about was sort of this idea of, call them lead magnets or interactive content that can give people a product like experience. What are some other plays that you would suggest companies run if they're looking to build out their PLG motion?
So there's a bunch. I mean, one that I like is using your product data for marketing purposes. And so not a classic PLG technique by any means, but I think like Gong has done an amazing job at being able to draw insights of, hey, what are the types of interactions that lead to you to close deals and win them versus lose them? Like how much should you be talking versus the other person? What should you say? What content you need to cover, what questions you need to ask. Most businesses are sitting on a really unique kind of gold mine of insights around a specific industry or use case, and no one knows kind of how to leverage that data because they maybe didn't even know it existed. And you can be that voice for your industry, and then it's very inevitable that anyone interested in that data is also often interested in then using your product to take where they are and get better at it. So essentially, like product oriented benchmarks or insights that you're able to capture from your product experience. Uh, Another thing that comes to mind for me is what's the entry offering for buyers. And so in this economic environment, folks might be hesitant to buy a six-figure, seven-figure agreement, multi-year agreement paid up front, for example, right? It's challenging to sell that way. But if you can find an entry level, say proof of value, starter package, pay as you go package that has a kind of baked amount of usage where you can expand afterwards, you can often come in under procurement thresholds, like come in for a specific use case or department need. Um, Deliver really outsized value and then expand. So it's kind of, I mean, classic land and expand, but you have to think about that product value has to be delivered really fast if you do that. And you have to often target not just that executive buyer, but someone that's a little bit below them, right? So this is often getting in at that manager level, maybe the director level, someone with less budget, a more specific problem, getting value really quickly for that audience at an affordable price, and then using that as your wedge to drive a much larger conversation. Uh, that's something that's kind of classic PLG, right? But just about any company can be thinking about. Final thing I would say, I mean, you can also stop me because I can go on forever about this. The final thing I would just say is about like, getting a handle on your product analytics. And using that to drive kind of smart actions with your customer base. And so customer health scores, for example, have been a thing for like a decade, maybe more than a decade, but they're still mostly BS and like underutilized. And so if I think about like, I talk to folks that tell me about the customer health score and they're like, well, if the customer, doesn't use the product this month or starts deleting users, then we flag them as at risk. It's like, well, you've actually already lost that customer. I hate to break it to you. They are not renewing. They just didn't tell you. You have to think about what are the leading indicators of someone finding value. And it's often setting up sticky integrations, adopting high value features, expanding to multiple use cases, things that create multiple champions in an organization. And if you start to look at what is the adoption of those things that in the life cycle of the customer, so how many of them are adopting those in month one, month two, month three, and so on, you can start to drive much higher retention and expansion with your customers, and just make smarter decisions because you're making them in a data driven way rather than a kind of a gut feel way. And so that's something that if you're a PLG company that has a free trial or freemium motion, you probably never had a sales interaction in the first place. So that product analytics data is your lifeblood. Like that is kind of your essentially your CRM for converting these folks. But if you're if you don't have that motion, you probably don't realize the value that you can capture from it. And then, if you're getting really sophisticated, you can start to use some of those insights to help guide your customers along. So, hey, customers like you who adopt this feature often need XYZ. Or, hey, we saw you tried to set up this integration, but weren't able to do it. We're going to offer some help through a CSM interaction or support conversation. So you can start to actually not just kind of be aware of your customers and where they are, but actually start to, automate or orchestrate getting your customers to see more value.
Hmm. Yeah. And again, that can happen right within the product experience, I imagine, right? It's like you hit a certain threshold of a health score, and all of a sudden, the next time I log into X piece of software, it could prompt me for this. You're probably ready for this feature. Like, have you checked this out, kind of thing.
Exactly. It's trigger an email, drive a product notification. Um, there's there's so much that can be done, and most of the kind of businesses that I've talked to that don't think of themselves as PLG, they don't have someone whose main goal is driving more adoption of existing products. They think about like how are we kind of expanding the surface area? How do we like serve new customers we don't have? How do we respond to the customer requests that are coming up, as opposed to driving more adoption of what we already have as a business?
Yeah, yeah. So where my head went there as you're talking, and it's going to be a little out of left field, but something I'm noticing within PLG motions more and more, and how people are buying, and social proof has always played a huge element in how people purchase. But I remember recently we bought a CRM. It was we ended up going with Affinity, and I literally went to ChatGPT, said top 10 CRMs for VCs, gave me a top 10 list. I did some research on my own, narrowed it down to like about 4, and then I went to other GPs I know, like, and respect, and got their thoughts and feedback, figured out how they are doing it, and then ultimately would have loved if I could have just had like a free trial on my own, would have rocked and rolled, probably set it all up myself, and there wasn't a full self-serve motion. But that social proof element, I think, is super interesting. Of all these like closed doors conversations that are happening in communities like the GTM fund community, Pavilion, how have you I think that's going to play in a really important role in this motion, because people are always going to want that little like trust layer, and that trust layer has often come through building a relationship with an account executive that over time you're like, oh, this person really knows what they're doing, they understand my business. But you can also build that trust component with colleagues, people that you've known for 10 years. Have you seen any companies kind of nail that piece? Like, it feels like there's this evolution of kind of GT reviews that is coming, and I'm trying to put my finger on.
It's an interesting time because so much of that conversation and the buying decision is happening in a way that's like hard to track or impossible to track. It's not showing up in your marketing attribution system. You're maybe flagging it as a like Google tracked lead or direct to your website when you're like, actually, there was a whole buying conversation that happened in one of these private communities. And that's really what did it. It wasn't your branded campaign at the top of Google search when someone searched your business name. Uh, but, so I think it's fascinating, and partly because so much of it's happening, and then we're making decisions where we're blind to the kind of reality in our business. But in terms of folks that are doing well at it, I've been doing some advising for a business called Aftershoot, which is in the AI photo kind of culling and editing space. Super interesting product for generally the professional photography crowd, uh, that can really kind of accelerate a manual process that photographers don't want to do. But if you think about their business, like the photography community is super tight knit. Everyone, if they're shooting at a wedding that needs a videographer or a second photographer, they're kind of all cooperating with each other, bringing one another into their own projects and so on. And so they naturally, talk about software. It was something that Aftershoot did really well is, they invite everyone who signs up, even for the free trial, to join their Facebook community. Facebook has been a huge driver of kind of community conversations, and that kind of community engagement is massive and drives a lot of awareness, and goodwill for Aftershoot. They also actually have an opportunity where a user that's signing up for a trial can request a demo, but that demo isn't given by anyone actually at the company. It's given by there's a network of customers who are professional photographers who've adopted the software, and those folks have agreed to kind of make some of their time available. And so you can book time via Calendly with one of those photographers, and the photographer is going to walk you through 30 minutes of how to use the product, but they're also going to talk about, hey, look, you actually maybe can turn around wedding photo edits in a week instead of a month. Maybe that's something you can charge extra for, right? Wouldn't the bride and groom want to get their wedding photos faster? And with AI, you can actually do that. And so they can have these conversations with users that a sales rep can certainly not have. And so that's a way to add that social proof more as a way to convert folks, right? Rather than to kind of get them to hear about you. But there's some really interesting opportunities going on if you are attuned to this is kind of a really influential aspect of the buying decision.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's very cool. Imagine getting your customers to do your demos for you. Do you know the incentive structure of how they're incentivizing these photographers to do that?
I don't have the exact one offhand. I think that the conversion is through the roof when this
I
happens.
bet.
So I don't know if it's paid on conversion or just paid on accepting kind of the meeting, but either way, it kind of correlates really strongly given the conversion when these things
Yeah,
happen.
so cool. Yeah, I imagine again going back to the affinity use case. If I could get a demo from like
From a VC.
from a VC who's like, "Hey, we just did this up, and here's the problems you're gonna have, and this part was annoying, but here's how we solved it." Like, wow, that would be really cool. And I don't like to talk our book on this podcast, but there is a very interesting company called Noble that we backed that is kind of riding this wave, and they'll allow you, let's say, if you were looking at like Pipedrive and you went on Pipedrive's website, it would pop down all of the connections that you have that are using Pipedrive, people people you trust, and then you can interact with them instead of uh, the team at Pipedrive, which I think is cool. So excited to see how those two kind of social proof and PLG continue to merge. But man, this has been awesome. I want to ask this question because we get this all the time, and it's because most of the folks listening to this are, early stage founders, early stage GTM leaders, and they're likely listening to this. And let's paint a picture of they just got out of founder led sales. They have maybe two AEs. They're doing traditional, top down sales. They've got a SDR. They're listening to this and they're like, okay, how do I, what's my first step in setting up a PLG motion? Like, who is the hire I make? What do they look like? And how can I sort of test this out in a low risk environment? Because obviously it's all about finding the right tests to do, and you can only do so many at the early stage. How would you advise folks that are there?
Well, I think the first thing is I don't know if you need to make a hire right away, especially before you've proven out that this is something you really want to invest in. So what I look at is what's the core KPI that is, the biggest bottleneck to your growth? Is that, hey, lead gen and kind of getting folks top of funnel? Is that converting folks to the funnel? Is that, retention? Is that expansion? Is that multi-product adoption? Like, what is it? And really narrow in on what that number one thing that if you could inflect at this point in the kind of buyer journey, um, things would look really different for your business. And then from there, I'd start to think about like what are the universe of options, and you could apply PLG, but you could also think about like automation and AI, next gen tech, or different approaches to using the people that you have that are doing this today. If I think about the current environment, pipeline is probably the number one issue folks raise, and so that's probably the area I would focus for most businesses. And then generally, it's something around lead gen, right? Because they maybe feel pretty good about once they have a lead, how they kind of prosecute that opportunity given the team. So if we narrow in on that specific opportunity, so lead gen within our target audience, yeah, PLG opportunities might be great. You probably are looking at things like, hey, we've got a lot of traffic on our website. How do we convert more of that traffic, right? Because they're not clicking the contact us button. And so if you have that, you could look at tools like a Warmly and RB2B, or there's a bunch of them that de-anonymize your website traffic and then let you run campaigns to these folks that are hitting your website or kind of showing signals of intent. You could also say, hey, actually, maybe an interactive demo in these pages is a really interesting opportunity. Or maybe we should adjust calls to action, have different calls to action on the homepage versus the kind of deeper pages. And then, you might think about like might then think about, okay, maybe we're getting good at converting that traffic on our website, but how do we get even more of it? That's when you're probably looking at these lead magnet concepts we talked about. You might be looking at how do we use our product data and push that out externally. You might look at how do we get more user generated content so that we rank better in SEO or drive more shareability. Like the number of ideas of things you can do is essentially limitless, but you have to hone in on exactly where matters most. And then I think you have to be pretty open. So, what's the best way to influence that metric with your target audience and for your specific product? And I wouldn't get too hung up on like, is this pure PLG or not? I would just think about, is this going to resonate from my target audience and help solve their problems in a way that's more scalable or more efficient than what we have today?
Hmm. Great answer. I like it. I like it. And yeah, don't go rush and make a hire who's going to solve all your problems. Go create so much volume in the lead gen that you need to hire someone to manage it and make it more efficient.
Totally. I would say the only time to like if you were facing this problem where you had ton of website traffic, a lot of that traffic was from SMBs that you probably don't want a sales rep on because that rep's time is too valuable. There's too much mid-market enterprise opportunities. But you think, hey, these are actually high quality buyers. Our product works for them. We just have to make the product a little easier to use and maybe let someone try it for free for 14 days or 30 days. If that's your problem, absolutely hire a product growth person, have them set up that free trial, them set up that self-service purchasing. But if I think about my conversations with companies right now, uh, that's probably 1 in 1,000 companies.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. You're lucky if you have that problem right now. So definitely take advantage of it. All right. I want to switch gears a little bit. So we always pull in a question from our listeners, and this is, funnily enough, one of the most common questions we get, even though this is the GTM podcast and we talk about everything go to market. And usually we have, founders or CROs on as guests. So I don't get to ask this question, but I'll ask it to you. And the question we get all the time is, how do I get into VC? I know, you were in consulting before, you made the transition into VC. Maybe talk a little bit about that. And then maybe if you were to do it again today, because I think it's quite different maybe in this environment, how you might do that today.
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer. I mean, for me, I kind of fell into it, right? I was working with software businesses on, improving their go-to-market, driving more revenue growth. And then a role opened up at OpenView for someone to kind of lead that function. And it was kind of right time, right place. I was in Boston, role was in Boston. Not a ton of those opportunities come up. It was at a time when I was, looking for a change. And so I was actually not thinking venture was a viable path for me at that point. I was looking more in-house opportunities or maybe private equity. And so I feel like I had a very unique path in. For folks today, my advice would probably be, if you can, start to do some angel investing, right? Like essentially do the job you want right now before you have it. But to the extent you're building your network, starting to write a few angel checks, getting building some theses around markets that you think are really interesting for new products, getting to know the founders of those companies, uh, and then if you can start sharing those with a couple of VCs of, hey, look, I have this thesis on this space. Here's what's happening. Here's why it opens up, an opportunity for the next gen of products. Here's 5 or 6 companies that seem really interesting. And if I were to pick one of those right now, I'd pick this one. And hey, I actually know that founder. Would you like me to make an intro? All of a sudden, the firm is going to be like, well, we need to bring this person on immediately, right? They would make an amazing associate or just investor. But you really, it's challenging as it is to do that while also having a day job. The more you can kind of already be doing the job you want, the more serious kind of folks will take you. The other angle is that most of the VC jobs aren't posted anywhere, and there's rarely like a job description or a formal rec. It's more about networking and using your network to get in. And then firms will often open up a job for someone that they think is really qualified, or can add something unique to their firm that they don't have today. And so I think just working your network, getting to know folks, starting to understand what's important to that firm and those individuals, and starting to help. So if that's, hey, they've got a portfolio company that has a challenge that you can help them solve. Maybe they've got a prospect that they're trying to build a relationship with that has that problem. If you can start to kind of network and show that value through what you're already good at, that's another route that can be a great way in.
Yeah. Lots of great advice there, and definitely VC hiring is, I would say, opportunistic. It's not the traditional, hey, we're looking for XYZ roles. If you bring something special to the firm, as you said, they'll often open up a role. And one thing I'll just throw in there too is, you mentioned, kind of sharing your deal flow and your thoughts and your thesis with these other, partners at firms you maybe aspire to work at. You can also share that, publicly as well, and just start, whether it's a newsletter or a little mini video series. I think I've seen a lot of folks leverage media as a format to just showcase their learnings and their understanding. And then maybe the last thing I'd put in there too is I would probably think about specializing in the early days, like just go really deep on one, category of whatever that may be that really, really interests you. But that's great
Yeah,
stuff.
those are great additions. I think only other thing I would just share is that many people like the idea of VC more than they like working at a firm.
It's fucking hard. It is. It's God. I don't know. Yeah, it's intense.
That's why, yeah, doing the job before you have the job can help you see whether it's actually for you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And you better like you better like sales because there's a lot of sales involved on all aspects of VC, whether it's fundraising, selling a founder, on taking your money versus someone else, and it's a it's a game of sprints too. You know, there's always like timing is always an issue. So when things have to get done, there's no weekends, there's no evenings when things have to move when a deal is getting done and there's a specific date it has to get done by. So
Totally. And it's a game of like probabilities. And so a lot of with VC, uh, you're saying no, or like most of the companies you talk to or deals you look at, you're not going to do for one reason or the other. And then most of the investments that folks make are generally not going to perform the way that, you know, you maybe expect them to. But a certain percentage are going to end up, you know, becoming deals that you would do, and then also becoming those kind of high flying companies. And I think it ends up being a very different mindset. Like if you think about a, you know, product manager, you can figure out what are the requirements for the product. You can figure out how to scope that, build it, launch it. And so there's some risk involved, but generally it's like if you do a great job at like the core thing that's in front of you, you're going to have like somewhat of a predictable outcome. Like you're going to be able to build the product you're trying to build. Um, in VC, it's extremely unpredictable in every aspect, and you won't know if you're good at it for 10 years. And even then, you won't really know if you're good at it.
yeah, yeah. I think for me personally, that is the hardest part of being in venture is the uncontrollables. There will always be uncontrollable, and it doesn't. You will never be able to control certain aspects of venture. But no, that's awesome. Thanks for the insight there. All right, that leaves us with our final two questions. Usually, my favorite questions to ask. I keep them intentionally vague so you can take them any way you want. First question is: what is one widely held belief that revenue leaders or founders believe to be true that you think is bullshit or no longer serving us?
I talk to a lot of folks that try to sell, you know, a big deal and a multi-year commit relatively early in the business life cycle. So let's say you're like a millionaire our business, got an enterprise opportunity. You can sell them an unlimited all you can eat plan for 100K, and they're willing to sign up for a 3-year commitment. That sounds amazing. It's going to help you hit your quarter. Like you're going to be so excited about that deal. And I see it kind of, especially in the early stages, but this happens kind of all throughout. Um, but there's a lot of folks that over-index on these opportunities and then come to regret them later on, because either they're bound to a customer that has a ton of requirements, is really challenging to manage, and maybe isn't even a good fit from where you're trying to go with your product, or their usage is through the roof. They're seeing incredible amounts of value. They might even be unprofitable from a consumption standpoint. And what you thought was a lot of money is a drop in the bucket relative to what they're spending on other things. And you have no way to renegotiate because you've just locked in for a multi year contract. The average early stage business increases price by about 60% between the 0 to a million phase and the 1 to 10 million phase. And so also just remember, like, you're understanding your target customer. You're getting more and more proof points about the value of what your product can do. You're more confident selling it, right, and positioning it. And so you can capture more of that value over time. But that's where that idea of like locking in that certainty feels really great in the moment. And then I think more often than not, folks come to regret it. I think in the age of kind of more and more AI enabled applications where there's real cost to delivering AI, but also real kind of step function value improvements. If you lock in a flat rate deal, given the cost structure of many of these businesses, there's some real risk there from a gross margin standpoint. And so I guess the advice would be look at probably annual instead of multi-year in the early days, and look at having a way to expand that customer rather than going all you can eat.
Yeah. I like it. I like when we get a hot take. A lot of revenue leaders love those multi-year deals. You said something there, and can you repeat that stat? You said price increases by 60% from what stage to what stage?
From the 0 to 1 million phase to the 1 to 10.
Wow, that's super interesting. That alone, right there, should hammer home that point. Like, are you willing to leave that on the table? That's super interesting. All right, final question as we wrap up. And Kyle, thanks so much for taking the time today. It's been a really enjoyable conversation. Everyone's looking for silver bullets. What is one tactic, go-to-market tactic or strategy that is working today for one of the companies you're working with?
The biggest thing that I've seen effective right now is even if you're building a horizontal product where you can sell to just about anyone, going to market like your vertical. And so getting extremely specific about who your ideal customer profile is. And I generally mean not just like these 5 industries with companies above 250 employees, but like as specific as you can of companies are using these technologies. They have these hires on their team. They're facing these challenges as a business. Like the more specific you can be, the better, because you can start to really dominate that space and then expand from a position of strength. And I think that today, it doesn't sound like new advice, right? That sounds like something that you've probably been told for 20 years. But the technology today to do hyper precise targeting is so much better than it used to be. Through tools like KeyPlay, Clay, Apollo, others, you can really actually identify an ICP in a data-driven way. You can figure out exactly who the right people are at those accounts, and then you can figure out where you are in the journey with them by de-anonymizing your website traffic, right? By actually having account-based metrics that allow you to see of that 1,000 accounts in your target list where they are in the journey with you, and not necessarily in like a classic ABM one-to-one way, but you can essentially do ABX to your accounts at scale through automation, AI, plus the best of what great go-to-market people can do. And so I think like that, going to market vertically and kind of taking that account based approach, but then still opening yourself up to the next gen tooling. That type of mindset seems to be really resonating and allows folks to, I think, like have better efficiency because they're much more targeted of who they're going after. And it actually allows them to take advantage of this next gen tooling, which I think most folks are like talking about more than they're really seeing value from right now.
Yeah, yeah. And in that scenario, you also start seeing this like referral flywheel start to crank. If you're known as the solution for X problem in this very specific set of all those people talk, all those buyers talk. So you'll get this natural kind of referral engine going, and your sellers start speaking that language so much more effectively because they're always like talking to the same type of buyer, which I like. Well, we agreed too much, so we see the world too much in a similar light. But that was a great conversation. I'm really excited for this next journey. I'll be following along with Tremont, and we'll be reading your newsletter, Growth Unhinged. Anything else you want to call out for listeners?
I guess just if I am pretty prolific on LinkedIn. I try to share quick thoughts 3 to 4 times a week, and very community centric, where I'm really in the comments section and trying to learn from folks, where often I'll have an idea, publish it. Yeah, someone will jump in with a comment, I'll hop on a call, I'll interview them for a post. And then I think it's essentially building in public and with the community. And so if you're interested in these topics too, and especially if you disagree with me on anything and have a different perspective, I frankly would love to hear that, because that's a perspective that should be shared more widely.
Beautiful, beautiful. So go follow Kyle on LinkedIn and go disagree with everything he says, and that's the call to action. If you have some strong arguments to back it up, but anyway, appreciate you, Kyle, and to our listeners. I say it every week. Listening's one thing. Execution is totally different. Hopefully, we gave you some tactics, ideas, and strategies to apply to your own business, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Scott.